Ideas, Inc., and I'm here with the Coalition for Open Democracy. I want to thank you all for coming for our broad coalition of veterans, of women's rights, people who care about good government, really today to call on the Senate to pass resolutions that have passed through the House. We have a series of speakers today, and we'll begin with Mary Cooney. Representative.
I am Representative Mary Cooney. I represent Plymouth, Holderness, and Hebron, Grafton 8, and I'm one of the co-sponsors of HCR 2, one of the resolutions which the New Hampshire Senate will not allow in their chamber. The fact that this and other resolutions we are speaking to you about today do not have the force of law does not diminish their importance. This resolution is to request Congress to begin the process for a constitutional amendment establishing that human beings, not corporations, are entitled to constitutional rights. The New Hampshire House has passed this resolution, as have many other chambers in other states across the nation, as well as local cities and towns. As any politician knows, you have to build support for change. This is one step which has been taken to raise awareness of the poison that has invaded our democracy, corporate money, and politics. The outrageous decision of the Supreme Court in January of 2010 in the Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, which equated corporations with natural persons, must be overturned. At this point, the only way to do that is to pass an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. As each state demonstrates support for such an amendment, the momentum builds for Congress to pass such an amendment. Sending a message sometimes is exactly what we want to do. 82% of Americans think that Citizens United should be overturned, that corporate expenditures in politics is fundamentally wrong, that the corporation should not have First Amendment rights. In New Hampshire, we have a tradition of respecting our process and respecting our different chambers in the general court. Each bill gets a hearing and a vote. When the Senate passed their rule prohibiting most resolutions from even being considered is a sign of disrespect for the House. The Senate obviously thinks that their resolutions are important because they sent one over to the House. SCR 1, relative to the special use permits in the White Mountain National Forest. Special use permits must go through the federal government since it is a national forest. This could be an ATV or snowmobile use, a ski area, logging, or a utility project, which might cut through the forest. The hypocrisy is obvious. We are here to convince the Senate to change their rule, or at least suspend it. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Paul Camacho. I'm from Concord. I'm representing myself. I'm one of the fossils who served in Vietnam as a rifle company sergeant in the Marine Corps. That's like 45 years ago. In my opinion, though, the rule is an abrogation of responsibility and contrary to the spirit of democracy, regardless of the issue at hand. The veterans issue, one of several resolutions, may in fact, in veterans' opinions, be kind of futile because challenging the VA and actually getting something out of them is really a hurdle. Nobody ever really grasps that. Nevertheless, you have to forward the resolutions down there in order to let them know that you're awake and watching them. So that almost every veteran realizes that. So that's what I'm interested in seeing that the resolutions are considered for two reasons. One, it's in the spirit of democracy that the House resolutions should be heard by the Senate, and the Senate resolutions should be heard by the House. And it's in the spirit of democracy that we should have this veterans resolution sent down to DC to sort of keep the VA on its feet, which it really needs. So thank you very much.
I'm Sally Davis, co-president of the League of Women Voters in New Hampshire. The League of Women Voters has always promoted the values and processes of representative government, assuring and increasing opportunities for citizen participation, working for open, accountable, representative, and transparent, responsive government, reflect the deeply held convictions of the League. The League of Women Voters of New Hampshire has been proud of the ability of our citizens to access our government and many steps along the way. While we believe that the processes determined by the legislature must follow a path that allows for extensive debate, compromise, and efficient decision-making, self-imposed rules that restrict some types of issues from reaching a legislative body are counterproductive. For us then, it was especially upsetting that one of the three resolutions, the Senate's rule change to require a 2/3 vote for consideration, was HJR 1, the resolution passed by the New Hampshire House of Representatives, authorizing the Joint Legislative Historical Committee to acquire and display a portrait of Marilla Ricker, the suffragist who was the first woman to declare her candidacy for governor of New Hampshire. This resolution was voted on to pass by the House on March 13th with the full faith of the New Hampshire House that it would be heard in the Senate. While New Hampshire citizens are experiencing a growing loss of confidence in the ability of our National Congress to make progress in solving issues of our time, it is disheartening to have this filter down to our state level. The use of resolutions has been a tradition allowing New Hampshire's residents to ask our state elected officials to make statements to our Congress on issues important to the state. The voice of the legislature has been viewed as a stronger voice from New Hampshire to Washington. Rule 326 will now narrowly define those resolutions, and a supermajority, 2/3 of the Senate, must vote to suspend that rule in order to hear the resolution. Supermajorities are difficult to achieve, and so, in effect, will restrict issues from debate and consideration on the Senate floor. The Senate does not seem to be terribly burdened by session discussion or votes, since there have been several weeks with no Senate sessions. The League urges the Senate to reconsider Rule 326 and make sure it gives an accurate reflection of the work of the Senate, the needs of our citizens, and the full faith of all New Hampshire citizens. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. My name is Bob Perry, and I represent the voters of Stratford and New Durham. SCR 1, a bipartisan Senate-sponsored resolution submitted in early January, was approved by the relevant committee 5-0. It passed the Senate body on a unanimous vote of 24-0. Thus demonstrating the value the Senate placed on the language contained in the resolution. That language begins with the following. Whereas the New Hampshire General Court has adopted numerous resolutions relative to the White Mountain National Forest over the last 2 decades. Its second paragraph opens with, whereas each of these resolutions has affirmed and communicated strong support of the people of New Hampshire through their elected representatives. I suggest that by its own language, the Senate has amply demonstrated the value it places on resolutions as a means of communication between New Hampshire and the federal government, and that the Senate has conceded that resolutions are a part of the important business we do in these chambers. The Senate, by its own admission, points out the importance of a respectful exchange between the House and the Senate on matters including resolutions, often reflecting the will of both bodies and our constituents as we communicate those positions to the federal government. Imposing a 2/3 rule before consideration of a House-passed resolution is counter to a respectful exchange of information. Lastly, the type and number of resolutions drafted by members of the House were known to the public, thus Senate leadership, as early as the fall of last year. It had an opportunity to change its rules restricting acceptance of resolutions long before February 14 of this year. Respecting the Senate, due process, and our constituents, House leadership did not change House rules to restrict acceptance of Senate-sponsored resolutions. I urge the Senate majority to withdraw its two-thirds rule, engage in meaningful debate, and vote on each resolution as our democratic process, common courtesy, and New Hampshire tradition require, and as our citizens expect. And I thank the Senate in advance for its reconsideration. Thank you. I do have a statement from Representative Steve Shurtleff, House Majority Leader, that I would like to read into the record as well. As a co-sponsor of HCR 1, which urges Congress to fund the development and implementation of a comprehensive health care system for New Hampshire's veterans, it is extremely disappointing that the Senate has refused to even consider this resolution. Senate introduction and passage of HCR 1 is essential to make Washington more aware of the problem our veterans face in accessing quality health care in this state. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Tebow, and I represent NARAL Pro-Choice New Hampshire and our statewide membership of over 4,000. What began as a Republican tactic to avoid taking a position on a resolution recognizing the historic U.S. Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion is now preventing many other equally important issues from being considered. New Hampshire has a long and proud tradition of open, transparent government. Our reasonable and collaborative style is what sets us apart from other states. Senate leadership's decision to suppress important issues from being thoughtfully discussed and debated flies in the face of this tradition. We expect more from our elected officials in this state. We expect them to act as the community role models they claim to be. We expect them to display leadership by approaching difficult issues with courage and integrity. And we expect them to carefully consider topics that are important to their constituents, even when politically unpopular. Putting politics before thoughtful debate is the kind of immature strategy being displayed in Washington and angering so many Americans today. Let's not adopt this attitude in New Hampshire.
I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I am Senator Martha Fuller Clark. I represent District 21, which consists of the city of Portsmouth and the surrounding communities of Newington, Durham, Madbury, Lee, Newfields, and Newmarket. As you can see from the people that are here today, there is grave concern about the decision that the Senate made to require that all resolutions coming before that body must have a two-thirds vote in order to even be discussed and considered. We are here today to ask the majority of the Senate to repeal this rule that makes it now next to impossible to consider any resolutions from either the Senate or the House. For years, New Hampshire has been recognized around the country for having one of the most open legislative processes of all state legislators. No bill can be pocketed. Every bill has to have a public hearing. Every bill has to be voted on in the body that it originated in. And if it passes in that body, it goes through the same process on the other side. I don't believe there is another legislature in the country that provides that kind of open government. And what we are seeing here today, or we're speaking to today, is that threat to our open government. To block all resolutions that fail to receive a two-thirds vote for coming to the floor for discussion defies this tradition of open government and fair debate. It sets a dangerous precedent, closing off consideration of valid and significant issues of concern to our citizens and to members of the House. It runs counter to free speech, and it also runs counter to our need to hold elected officials responsible for the positions that they take on critical issues. That is why we are here today to call upon the majority in the Senate to reverse this rule, which is really a threat to democracy. Thank you.